Welcome back, everyone. Mike McConville here one more time, Stratford, Ontario, Canada. We have an FRX Floyd Rose. So this is the latest piece of machinery from Floyd Rose. Now this guitar was sent up from Austin, Texas, and Trevor is a aerospace guy from what I understand, and very talented, but he's not really set up for the guitar thing, and he recognized that. So he sent this up for me to do the install on it. It's not that it's super tricky, it's just that, you know, you got to be set up for this particular job. So I'm going to take this apart and kind of explain as I go the challenges that he was coming up against. Oh, before I do that, I'm sure there's other instances where you run into this problem where you have a low profile fixture that doesn't really allow you to properly get in with an Allen key to make the adjustments. So this is low-tech solution to a high-tech challenge. One more time. I simply drilled a hole in the end of that dowel. I cut the right angle off of the Allen key, and then I didn't glue it in, it's a slightly undersized hole, kind of tapped it in with a dead blow hammer, and now it's easy peasy to adjust this thing. Again, low-tech solution to a high-tech challenge. So now I can get at these lickety-split. We're going to pull this apart. So these Allen head fixtures actually push into these inserts and allow the whole thing to tilt. I can remove this whole thing completely. And that's the sort of bracket. Oh yeah, I know, it looks a little rough, but and it is a little rough. But we are going to clean this up first of all, and we will have to check the centers on this. Trevor had mentioned that he said I may need to pull these out, fill them in, and re-drill to get them perfectly centered. But we'll see as we move along. So the next thing now is to set up to clean up this whole area and route that out. And I've got sort of a universal router plate for guitar stuff that I use for this type of job. Let me set up and we'll bring you in and show you exactly what we're doing. So we'll start by skimming this cavity. Yeah, I'm happy with that for our final depth. Now we'll just clean up these two ends. Well, I think we're a little closer to the mark here, Trev, you know, as far as your initial intentions go. I did want to point out for all of you Tech Deck guys, I put an extra cinch hook on here to strap down the neck platform to act as a counterweight to hold this whole thing level while we did the routering. It's supported pretty solid by the top edge of the neck platform. The weight of the router, you know, I just wanted a little bit of reassurance here. So if you need any more cinch hooks, get hold of Greg. He can send them out to you. So the two critical movements, of course, are this movement here to make sure that it's back far enough. And that's as far back as it goes right now. It looks like we may have to pull those posts and move them back further. Check that again. Well, it looks like you're right, Trev, on shifting that over. Even though you got those holes drilled on perfect center to the bridge casting, the whole thing is a little bit too far this way. So you can see where it's running off here. Looks like about 2 millimeters to get those strings to line up and the pickups to line up. I'll just double check that. So to the center of the 12th fret, we 12 and 7/16. I put my number 1 on the center of that 12th fret. And if I look here, 13 and 7/16 brings us back. And we need to intonate, so no. Oh boy, okay. Here's a tip for all of you guys that are putting bridges on, because of course this is the $1,000,000 question. The short answer is you need 6 millimeters of extra length past the theoretical length at the focal point on the bridge. So the simple way to do it, let's just, for the sake of math, let's say this is a 24-inch scale. So the distance from the leading edge of the nut to the center of the 12th fret would be 12 inches, and the theoretical distance from the center of the 12th fret to the bridge is also 12 inches. 12 and 12, 24. But the actual distance, the actual compensated distance, in most cases, you know, the Gibson 24 and 5/8 inch scale or the Fender 25 and a half inch scale, you want to go about 6 millimeters beyond the theoretical distance. Add 6 millimeters and 3 millimeters. Now, if you do that, you want to make sure that the travel distance of the saddle is right in the middle, so you can make it a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. If you do that, 6 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 99% of the time you're going to be fine. Now with an acoustic guitar it's a completely different thing, and I've covered that in other videos and I will cover it again. The problem here is twofold. This whole thing needs to move back about 1/4 of an inch at least. These posts need to be pulled. I need to fill it, re-drill it, and move that over about 2 millimeters. Alright, treble side is done. That hole will need to be re-drilled to feed that ground wire through. We'll do the bass side now. Okay, we'll come back in the morning and figure out the location of that bridge. So once we connect these dots with the machinist rule, we have now established the trajectory of the 1st string and the 6th string. So all our calculations are going to be based on that. So I'm going up the center of the neck, and at the 12th fret, so now as we work out the bridge placement, the first thing we take into consideration is the theoretical distance. So this line here represents double the length from the nut to the center of the 12th fret. So this is our 62.7 centimeters, or 627 millimeters if you will. So that's our theoretical distance. This is the trajectory of the 6th string. We add 6 millimeters of length from this point to this point. When we come over to the treble side, we add 3 millimeters of length from this point to this point. So everything we're doing here is to determine the placement of the bridge for maximum intonation and adjustment. This bridge has 2 threaded indexing positions for each of the 6 saddles. Now for those of you that are following my channel, you'll probably remember that Babbitt's bridge, which actually had 3 threaded indexing positions for the saddles. 2 is plenty. We'll be able to work with that. So what I've done is I have measured the distance from the focal point on the 6th string saddle to the front of the plate with my vernier calipers. It is 691 thou. So if you remember, this was our theoretical distance of the scale length. Double the distance from the nut to the center of the 12th fret. That's where we ended up. But the actual distance, or compensated distance, we added 6 millimeters. You want that 6 millimeters to fall on the saddle so that you have adjustment to be able to move this saddle back or move it forward. And that basically keeps you covered for different tunings and different string gauges. On the treble side, or the 1st string, we had 3 millimeters of compensation. On this saddle, we want that one to be in the middle as well. And the measurement from the center of the 1st string to the edge of the plate is 576 thou. And you can see that this saddle is able to move forward or back. This line right here represents the edge of the plate. So now when we put the plate here, that's going to give us the best possible case scenario for being able to adjust the intonation with whatever gauge of string and whatever tuning the customer chooses. Well, the bridge ground is installed, both posts are installed. When I read in the instructions that a canal sometimes was needed for that spring-loaded push rod, I figured we'd be back. So I pulled the router plate out, and I had a sneaky suspicion I probably would go at it a second time. I think we're finally ready to string it up. So as we wrap up this video, the last two things I want to mention are the adjustment of the action. So the way the action on the trem arm is adjusted, it can be increased or decreased with an Allen key. And that increases or decreases the tension on this horizontal compression spring. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind when you see a spring that diameter is the Bigsby. Of course, this spring moves horizontally, and the Bigsby spring moves vertically. You don't want to confuse this with the Bigsby because the K value of this spring is much stiffer. For anyone who's familiar with the Bigsby system, it's pretty spongy. This is not spongy at all. It comes back to a dead stop every time. And that dead stop is adjusted by this thumb wheel that butts up against the underside of the plate. So the most stable use for this type of system is adjust it like it is now, where it's dive only. We have that spring adjusted now, 10 to 46 strings, concert pitch. All of that calibration is done. I'm going to bring you into the tuner and you can see just how stable it is. The other thing I wanted to mention, you saw my little fixture with the Allen key in it. When you tighten up these screws, you don't reef them down. There's a recess or a collar in both of these fasteners that adjust the main bracket up and down. So you just want to be careful not to tighten these too much. You just snug them in until they touch the collar on these two posts. Have a look and listen at just how stable this bar is. Not putting a lot of tension on that because that will lower the pitch. Now to stabilize the action on the threads of that thumb wheel, I'm just wicking just a touch of Loctite on those threads. Now this is the removable Loctite. It's not permanent. I just kind of lubricate those threads with the Loctite and I'll just wick up the excess there. So by engaging that thumb wheel to the underside of the pivoting plate, this gives you a positive stop and is by far the most stable orientation. For those that want to be able to pull up on the bar, then you can spin that thumb wheel down out of the way and that will allow you to pull back on the bar to raise the pitch. Can be done, but this is definitely the most stable way to go. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was the action of the actual bar. You know, to be able to swing it out of the way or pull it up and it stays. There's a nylon collar here, like I've seen on other systems, but this actually has two Allen head set screws that allow you to adjust that bar so that it just falls out of the way, or right now it moves and it stays. But if you want it to stay like that, then you pretty well have to leave it on the guitar, and of course that becomes a problem when you go to put the guitar in the case because you can't close the lid. But if the guitar is out on a stand or it's in the studio, then you can just leave it. It's a bit of an irritation, but it's nature of the beast. To have that type of stability, we've got those 2 set screws. But to remove the bar, we need to back off quite a bit. So this is moment of truth. This is what we got right out of the gate. The low E is 8 cents sharp, lots of room for it to move back. The A string is 3 cents flat. I'll move that machine screw to the forward hole. The D is 1 cent flat, lots of room to come forward. Just nudge that tooth out. The G string is 10 cents flat. So very likely I will switch over to the forward threaded hole in the plate for that one. The B is already in the forward hole, and there is lots of room to come forward to get rid of that 11 cents flat. Same thing with the high E, 4 cents flat, lots of room to move on that one. So we are definitely honed in as far as positioning the bridge where it needs to be. So this is the wrap-up on Trevor's Eastman guitar and the Floyd Rose FRX install. Very happy with this alignment. You can see that both strings just grace the outside magnets. So we got equidistance there, happy with that. And you can see that the distance from the outside of the bevel on the crown to the string is equidistance as well. So we got the alignment perfect. All of these saddles are perfectly in tune now. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you want to be able to have room to move back or forward. We left lots of extra travel. So these are 10 to 46 at concert pitch. Lots of room on each saddle to move both ways if necessary. I did hopscotch that G-string saddle to the forward hole. So as it turns out, it's just the 6th string saddle where we use the rear threaded hole in the plate. Let's do our proverbial tuning test. You'll see how accurate this is. Here we go. 6th string. Foam over. 5th string. 4th string. Third string. Here's the 2nd string. And finally the 1st string. Gotta admit, it's actually a pretty nice looking guitar. The headstock is kind of somewhere between Epiphone and Gibson. This is part of the FRX package, this locking nut mechanism, and even that plate that goes on the face. That's metal as well. So there's our view from this end. There we go. There's one last look before we go into the studio and plug it in and finally get to check this guitar out. Okay, so we'll start by just going through some chords. I'll just play through the chords of this loop.